You go by Sarah or Sarah? Sarah. I can take my glasses off first.
We don't have connection, so it's going to be recorded.
Why not? There's no connection? How could that be?
Video, but it won't be live.
Why?
It will let you know if your connection improves, and you can start broadcasting live in the
At the
same video.
Kotel? That's weird. Because usually at the Kotel, lots of signal here. Keep trying.
I think we're on live.
Great. Hi, everyone. Josh Wander live. We're at the Kotel, and we're going to be taking a little bit of a walking tour as we speak. And we'll give it a few minutes just for people to start logging on. And we welcome your questions. So start asking away, and we'll get it going. Meanwhile, we'll start walking here with Sarah, and we're going to be going past the Kotel into some of the other quarters of the old city, and hopefully see some things that you haven't seen before. You don't know whether how's the mic working? People are logged on yet?
People seem to be logged on.
If people are logged on and they can hear me, we're just testing the mic here.
Someone can write, yes, they can hear us.
Yes.
That would be fabulous.
If everybody can hear me, let me know that you can be heard, that I'm heard, so I can continue this. Anybody hear me? Testing 1, 2, 3. Anyone hear me? Anyone not hear me? Okay, if someone could just write that they hear me, we can continue the interview. No, hopefully you can hear me, and I'm just not mumbling to myself here. You want my phone? Okay. We're gonna try testing this, and then we're gonna start the interview. We're waiting again until some people connect on, so that we can.
We hear you perfectly.
Oh, great,
Excellent.
great.
Thank you, Ryan Amasha.
Okay, so everybody is welcome to ask questions. We're here at the Western Wall of the Kotel in Jerusalem, and I'm going to take you around a little bit to some of the places that I go on a daily basis to answer calls for United Hatzalah. So if you want to walk with me, we'll walk this way. Any questions that you may have, just ask them, and we'll be happy to get to your questions. We're here at the Western Wall. This is the Western Wall of the Temple Mount. Many people don't understand that this is one of the retaining walls that surround the Temple Mount. There are actually a number of them. Most people are familiar with this exposed part of the Western Wall, which is much, much larger than what you see right here. This is a very small section of the almost half a kilometer wall that goes on the western side. And we're going to walk right past it today because we're going to go into what is called the Muslim Quarter. Now, the old city is divided into a 4-quarter system. And those 4 quarters were basically created by the British Mandate about 70 years ago, 80 years ago. They created this quarter system in the old city. And the 4 quarters are the Jewish, the Muslim, the Armenian, and the Christian quarters. So many people are familiar with the Jewish quarter, but the Jewish quarter is probably not the best place to get an idea of what the old city of Jerusalem originally looked like, because the Jewish quarter was basically demolished in 1948 during the war, and it was only 19 years later, in 1967, when we returned to Jerusalem, that it was rebuilt. So what you see, even though it looks old today in the Jewish quarter, it's actually mostly new construction. So if you really want to feel the way that the old city felt like hundreds of years ago, the best way to do it is to visit the other quarters of the old city. And that's where we're going now. We're going to go through the tunnel. The tunnel takes you to what is called the Muslim Quarter. And it goes past, hopefully it won't lose signal over here. It goes past, if anybody comes here and wants to do the Kotel tunnel tours, where you can actually walk the whole length of the Western Wall. That could be entered over here. You buy tickets at the ticket office. You can go into the thing. We're going to go, again, straight through to what is called Hadiya Street, or in Arabic, El-Wad. This street goes from the Western Wall, and it continues all the way until the Damascus Gate to Shar Shechem. So that's where we're headed now.
We apologize if there are in and outs of reception. Hopefully
I don't know if they can hear you because I'm mic'd up. But
Say that.
anyways, we apologize if there's any problems with the reception because we are going into different areas which may or may not have reception. So if there is any outages, just stay with us and we will be right back as it clears. So it's a little bit crowded, which is a good thing today. We have a lot of tourists that come through here. I would say millions of tourists come here through the year. And again, we're on, let's move over to the side. We're on the street called Hadiya Street or El Waz Street, and it leads all the way to the Damascus Gate. This is part of what is referred to as the Muslim Quarter. And again, we're in the old city of Jerusalem. Any questions, please feel free to ask. You want my phone? Okay. So again, we're walking through. This is a very, I'm not sure what you want to see. Let's see if we can, yeah, it's on there. Okay.
So I'm going to stop and ask, I don't know if people can hear me, but you can repeat my question?
Yes.
When you get calls, is it for all 4 quarters?
So when I get calls, the question is it for all 4 quarters? So I'm actually part of 2 different groups. The city of Jerusalem, United Hatzalah, divides into different districts. And I'm part of 2 of those districts. One of them is for Eastern Jerusalem. And the other one is for just the old city of Jerusalem, which is inside the walls of the old city. Right now we're in the old city walls, and that includes all 4 quarters of the old city. Once we go out of the walls, we'll be in the eastern section, which is east of the old city. Even though this is all considered East Jerusalem as far as what the world would consider East Jerusalem, we have a separate district in United Hatzalah just for the old city. Let's walk up this road over here. We're going up. This is called Hadiya Street, and this street, even though it's in the Muslim Quarter, has a lot of Jews living in it. It actually has a yeshiva on it. The yeshiva is the Breslov Yeshiva, Shuvu Banim, and you can see, even though we're in what's called the Muslim Quarter, you can see Jewish residents here walking in or standing, speaking in the street, and it's not unusual to see people in all the quarters. It's sometimes a little bit confusing because you go to some of the quarters that are called the Muslim Quarter and there are a lot of churches, or you go to the Jewish quarter or another quarter and you may see mosques. So it's not always clear which quarter you're in, but again, we're going to be walking through the different quarters. Actually, let's walk back. I have a great idea. Yeah, did you?
I just want to make sure everyone can hear us because I'm not hearing it on this one. Could everyone, you want to
You're not hearing because it's on this.
Can you hear it? Let's just make sure that it's...
Yes, I hear it fine.
Everyone can hear, we're good?
Everybody can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a delay, but everybody can hear.
Perfect.
Okay. Great.
I'll let you.
So again, we're continuing down. Again, I don't know how many people of you have been to Jerusalem, been to the Old City, been to Israel, but this is a very exciting place to be. There's a never-ending groups that come here from around the world, pilgrims, from Christians, Jews, Muslims from around the globe that come here, as well as every head of state, every famous movie star, every singer, every president, every prime minister. They all come to this place. Got to be careful over here. You never know when a ball's going to hit you. And this is actually, since there are so many millions of tourists that are walking through here every day, there are actually a lot of calls that are made to United Hatzalah. These calls are made because there are medical emergencies of all types. It could be a traumatic fall that somebody has, or it could be someone who has a illness. And United Hatzalah treats them all. They treat, like I said, indiscriminately. They just treat.
Okay, we're back on?
Okay. So I was just explaining how we indiscriminately, and in United Hatzalah, treat all Jew or we offer a run.
We're in and out of reception.
In and out of reception. Let's go over there. Let's turn over here. Let me know when we're back on.
We're back on.
We're back on. We've been here, and many people that have been here have not made it around. I explained a little bit earlier for those that were already tuned in that we're at the Western Wall. Now, the Western Wall is a retaining wall that was built by Herod about 2,000 years ago. It was built in order to be a support, a retaining wall, for the Temple Mount. Now, what that means is we're on the western side now of the Temple Mount, And we're going to go to that western wall. Is a small exposed part, a kilometer long wall. So right now we're going to go to another exposed part, which is a little bit less known, and it's called the Kotel Hakatan, the small wall. It's another exposed part of the same western wall that we saw earlier. Hi, how are you? It's a small exposed part of this wall. By the way, this architecture that you see is called Mameluke. It's an early Islamic architecture. You can see the red and the white stone over here. Jerusalem has, especially the Old City, layer after layer of history and civilizations that are over here. Now, whenever you see a green door, that is usually depicts the this over here is a green door that leads to the Temple Mount. This is one of the entrances to Temple Mount. Now, only one of the entrances is accessible, is not restricted to all the people, meaning there's only one entrance. You're going to be my cutout over here. Let's continue back over here. There's only one entrance that non-Muslims are allowed to go into. That's the Mugabe Gate. The Mugabe Gate is the ramp that goes up on the southern side of the western wall. Okay, let's go through here and watch a step. Okay, Sarah, we're here. This is the Kotel HaKatan. This is the small wall. This is part of the same Kotel that you have over there. Most people are not familiar with this, but there were many times through history where people did not have access to the larger of the western walls, and they came to this wall. Again, this is the same wall, just an extension of where most people pray at on the other side. Now, it looks a little bit smaller. That's why it's called the small wall. But there's a reason for that, and that is because down over there was before 1967, there was a neighborhood, an Arab neighborhood that was located in what they call the Kotel Plaza today, that big open space where people stand around or they come to the Western Wall. That was called the Mugabe, or the Moroccan Quarter. And in 1967, after the war, the Israeli authorities basically demolished this entire quarter and dug down into the ground many layers. And when they dug down, they exposed more of the Western Wall, and that's why that part of the Western Wall looks a lot larger than this one does, because this wasn't dug down. But you can see, Sarah, if you want to look, just turn the camera a little bit around, you can see how the Arab houses are right behind us here. And this small alleyway is the way that the Kotel looked for hundreds of years before 1967, before the Six-Day War. This is what it would have looked like, this small alleyway coming to the wall. Unfortunately, it was mistreated during those 19 years between 48 and 67. It was under illegal Jordanian occupation, and they mistreated this area in many ways. Behind us is actually, you can see, Sarah, there are urinals that were made by the Jordanians that were closed up. Unfortunately, this was not treated with the proper respect that a holy site should have. But again, even today, you have people coming here, and you have people that are praying here on a regular basis, and it's very exciting, again, for people that have never been to Jerusalem, haven't been to the Old City, or just have been through their general tours of the Western Wall and the Jewish Quarter. It's really important to see these other sites, because this really gives you the proper perspective and context and history of the Old City. Any questions?
No.
Okay, shoot out the questions, or if you want to ask me questions, we'll
I mean, I just have questions prior from, I don't know if people can hear me, so you can repeat what I'm saying. From prior to the Facebook Live that we're doing, people had started to ask questions. Obviously, this is all fascinating, and I'm sure hundreds of thousands of people didn't even know this existed. In terms of just practically being a medic in the Old City, how does it work when you get a call and you're in one quarter, you're in another quarter, in terms of GPS, in terms of our system, Now Force? Does it explain, I hope people can hear me, does it explain exactly in terms of street names? How does it work in terms of navigating your way around?
Okay. So basically, when calls are made to an emergency, calls are made to an ambulance, they immediately go to the command center of United Hatzalah. And there are dispatchers that are sitting 24/7, and they're collecting these calls, this information, and they're sending it out to these different teams, to these different districts that I explained to you we have the city split into. When we get a call, we get it on two different ways. One of them is through our mirror system, which is now being upgraded to a much more modern smartphone system. but we can get it on this. Now, this can be set according to the district. So if it's set to the district here in the Old City, actually, I'm in the Old City now, so I'm going to set it to that, and I get a call. So it'll immediately come up on this phone, and it'll tell me exactly where to go to. Now, usually in the Old City is a lot more complicated than many places because there's a lot of narrow alleyways and places. It's much more complicated than most even dispatchers in United Hatzalah are familiar with. So usually they tell people from the outside, the medics that are coming from the outside of the Old City, just to come to one of the 8 gates. There are 8 modern gates of the Old City. So they'll say, come to the Lions Gate, or come to the Dung Gate, or come to the Jaffa Gate, and from there you'll be directed. But for the crew that's here in the Old City, we're very familiar with all these alleyways. So for us, we are able to communicate back and forth through this walkie-talkie system. I think in America they used to call it at least the Nextel system. And we're able to speak to each other and tell each other exactly where the emergency is. Now, the other way that we are contacted is through our smartphones, where there's an application that you mentioned, Sarah, which is called NowForce. And that application, should I point that out? We have this NowForce application, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but NowForce over here. Basically, what this application does is whenever there is an emergency call made to the dispatchers, this system very, very smartly is able to locate the 5 closest medical personnel to that emergency and immediately send them a message saying that you are one of the 5 closest. Go to this location. Are you able to go to this location? Now, we're all volunteers. So we get to choose. If we're available, we write we can. If not, it goes over to the next closest volunteer, and that continues to happen until we have enough people that have responded to the medical emergency. So,
do you have reception in these walls, and we see that there are tunnels? How does that work in terms of
reception?
Yeah, reception.
So I would say that the reception of our Nextel system, of our Mir system, is much better than most of the cell phones. But if you have cell phone service, for sure that we have reception. That's not usually a problem. Again, there are some blind spots, some spots that are problematic. But in general, we have clear reception. Again, this is a place where millions of tourists come to with their cell phones, taking pictures, wanting internet. So the cell phone companies have definitely given a lot of thought to making it good for internet reception all over the Old City.
Rafael has a question. Maybe repeat the question. Maybe someone can let us know if they hear me talking or not.
Yeah, can anybody hear Sarah? Because I'm mic'd up and she's not, so we're not sure whether you can hear her or not.
The question is from Rafael. There's so much history here. What inspired you to save lives in this neighborhood that is helping the coexistence in the area? Is it helping the coexistence in the area?
Okay, I take that as 2 different questions. What prompted me to be here? Well, first of all, I have I would say, for lack of a better explanation, a deep soul connection to Jerusalem. I feel that this is where I belong. This is where I've always felt a deep connection to, and I've lived in all 4 quarters at different times in my life of the Old City. I've lived in all 4 quarters. Now I live outside the Old City in the Eastern District, on the Mount of Olives, which hopefully we'll get to also. But so I feel very comfortable. I feel very at home. One of the first things I did, when I fell in love with this place, was to make it my business to learn even before I was a medic, to learn all the alleyways and all the different shortcuts over here in order to be able to get around. And to this day, I mean it's very special to me. Now, as far as coexistence, absolutely, it affects coexistence in the area. Again, we treat indiscriminately Jews, Muslims, Christians, tourists of all different nationalities here 24/7. So, of course, if we're treating someone that's of another nationality or religion, then that obviously creates a bond between us and obviously helps with a sense of coexistence in the area. And again, we have in United Hatzalah medics that come from all different persuasions. We have Jewish medics, we have Christian medics, we have Muslim medics, and we're all treating each other. So it is definitely a sense, at least in this microcosm of United Hatzalah, an idea of coexistence. Let's continue walking. I don't know, did you cut out in the tunnel? Okay, so do you have any other questions? Or?
Seems that they can't hear.
Yes. If they can't hear, that's fine.
Yeah, 1 second.
Go ahead.
Getting the whole experience here.
This is one of the entrances, one of the many entrances to the Temple Mount. This is called Shar HaBarzel, and as you can see, this is actually the ground level of the Temple Mount. Which when you get to the Kotel, if you ever go to the Western Wall, you would not be at the ground level, but you would be way below the ground level. Again, they dug down in 1967 and exposed a lot more of this retaining wall. So yes.
Repeat my questions, as it seems that people can't hear me so much.
Okay.
If possible, we want to know if there was a call to Temple Mount, how would that work?
Great question. Actually, it's a great question. First of all, it's happened many times. It's not unusual for it to happen. Be careful, there are steps and it's slippery, so just careful where you're walking. Yeah. Let me put it this way. First of all, we have the only ambulance here in the Old City, I think in the world, that has special shoes in it. Let's turn to the left here. Has special shoes in it for the purpose of, you're going to be careful on the stairs and your head. Has special shoes in it for the purpose of walking on the Temple Mount. According to Jewish law, when you're on the Temple Mount, you're not supposed to wear leather shoes. So if we were to be wearing leather shoes, and of course if we had the time to do this in a medical emergency, you may not have the time. But if you had the time to do this, we would be able to flip on these other shoes in order to go onto the Temple Mount according to Jewish law. I think it's the only place like that in the world. I think you can hear me because I'm mic'd, but that in the background you hear loud music. That's okay. We're going to see in the foreground over here, well, as soon as you get through here, we're going to be in the Cotton Shuk, another place in the old city of Jerusalem. If we walk over here, you'll be able to, over here to the Temple Mount. And this entrance to the Temple Mount is actually the closest you can get to the Holy of Holies, actually stood. And you'll be able to, we're not going to be allowed to go up to the steps to the top, but you will be able to see the Dome of the Rock, which is, careful, where according to most opinions is where the Holy of Holies. I'm going to get back to your question, but let's get all the way to the steps over here. And then we're going to walk out. Sarah, you're going to be able to get. So if you can get that in the background, can you see the Dome of the Rock behind us? Right, this is the closest. Okay, take my word for it. We're right by the place where the Holy of Holies was on the Temple Mount. This is one of the entrances to the Temple Mount, another green doors, and it's called the Cotton Gate. This is about, I believe it's a 700-year-old marketplace. Let's start walking back. A 700-year-old marketplace, and it is bustling today with traffic, mostly Muslim residents that can drink their coffee here, smoke their nargilas, and as you can see, there's candy being sold, different stands selling all different goods and services. Getting back to the question about the Temple Mount, so we do service the Temple Mount, and we have special restrictions and special ways of doing that. I've been called numerous times to the Temple Mount on different occasions. Sometimes it's just a medical emergency of a tourist that has some sort of medical emergency on the mount, and sometimes it's unfortunately due to a terrorist incident. Not so long ago, about a half a year ago, there were 2 police officers that were mortally wounded on the Temple Mount, and I was one of the medics that was responding to that call, and it was very interesting in many ways. There's a lot to talk about the Temple Mount. But let's see if I answered that question properly. I don't know. Whoever asked the question. Did I answer your question, or did you want more information about it?
Feel free to ask more. Someone's asking, what is the most inspirational call you've ever received?
Wow, that's a difficult question because they're all inspiration. Each one, saving lives. Careful, saving lives is by nature inspirational. So. Let's head back towards the Western Wall. It is by nature inspirational. So every person that I've touched, everybody that I've treated in some way is an inspiration. Even to me, I mean, often we go to calls every day, and often we get somewhat desensitized to it, to the extent where we may forget that we just delivered someone's baby, or we just saved someone's life, and then years will go by, and we'll meet this person on the street, and the person will thank us profusely for saving their life or delivering their baby or doing whatever it was. And we unfortunately go to so many calls, or fortunately when it comes to delivering babies, that sometimes we forget everybody that we treat. But we do definitely affect the lives of so many people. And like I said, it's inspirational on both sides. It's inspirational for us to be in this position of being a messenger to do this holy work, and it's also inspirational for the people to see that there are all these thousands of volunteers that are willing to drop everything, drop work to. So, yeah, the end anyway. So we get to the end, the picture of the Western Wall.
Okay, we're back.
We're off again.
On and off.
On and off. On and off. Sketchy here, but we will definitely get back to you.
We'll pick up.
Okay.
Okay, I think
We're on.
maybe we're back on. We hope.
Hopefully we're back on, because like I said, we went through a little bit of time. We're back here at the Western Wall with the hundreds and thousands of tourists that come here every day. And of course, this is a great thing to have all these tourists here, but it's also with trouble. And what I mean by that is when somebody comes from abroad and they have some sort of medical than your average person, right? Your average citizen is this person's coming from thousands of miles away, may not speak the language, feel well, they're having some sort of they've fallen and they've hurt themselves, and at that point we are put in the position that we have, if they basically be that bridge for them to. It's really weird because this is usually great reception here. Let's get back in the car and we'll start moving away from here, and it should be fine. Olives, and you can feel worth waiting for. Those people that have tuned in early on of Jerusalem, the olives where I live, and we're going to have to jump in the car for this.
Okay, we're getting in the car. Okay, so here we are.
Seatbelt up over here.
I guess the most one of the most interesting things that people want to hear about is, as I understand it, there are. Okay, so United Hatzalah has over 45 branches all across Israel from north to south, and one of the branches, or chapters, Snifim in Hebrew, is the East Jerusalem chapter. And as Josh already mentioned, there are so many Arabs, we have Christians. This is an organization that really has across the board, religion is not an issue. This is about saving lives, not about saving Jewish lives, and not about Jewish lives saving Jewish lives. It's about people saving people. In East Jerusalem, though, I would imagine the majority, if not all, of the volunteers are Muslim Arabs. You being a Jew, can you explain, how did you find yourself in this situation, or in this amazing, I guess you could say, opportunity that you're part of, your co-volunteers are Arabs, Muslims, you're part of the East Jerusalem United Hatzalah Snif chapter. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So first of all, Sarah, today there are Jewish enclaves all around. East Jerusalem is a little bit of a misnomer, because when the world refers to as East Jerusalem, they're referring to Pisgat Zev in the north, and they're referring to Gilo in the south. Of course, where we just were in the Old City is part of East Jerusalem, as well as where we're headed now to the east of the Old City is also East Jerusalem. So just to get your bearing straight, we are headed east of the Old City, which is part of the greater Eastern Jerusalem. We are actually right now traveling on what is called Mount Moriah. Most people, Har Moriah, associate Har Moriah or Mount Moriah with the Temple Mount, which is indeed up to our left over here. But we're on the slope. That's the peak of the mountain, and we're on the slope that's sloping down into or down to the Kidron Valley, which is down to our right over here, and it comes up on the other side as the Mount of Olives. The Mount of Olives is this mountain ridge that starts all the way from the north in what is called today Mount Scopus or Hebrew University, and it continues across the entire way. Most of the Jewish cemetery that most people are familiar with, if they're familiar with Har HaZeisim, is located in the south and southeastern sides of the mountain. So that's where I live. I live actually in a community. Most people, even Israelis, are somewhat surprised when they hear that there is a Jewish community, a very large and thriving Jewish community on the Mount of Olives today. There are actually numerous communities. We live in the largest with 120 families and growing. So yes, there are Jews in East Jerusalem, in many different communities across East Jerusalem. I would say thousands, in numbers of thousands, and growing very, very rapidly. That having been said, most of the population is an Arab population. And many of the medics, most of the medics, the vast majority of medics in the East Jerusalem area are Muslim or Arab. Not necessarily Muslim, they could be Christian Arab as well. And they are servicing this area. Now, I, as a Jew living in this area, also service this area, but for me, it sometimes puts me in an interesting situation where I am sent to calls across the Muslim neighborhoods of East Jerusalem in order to save lives of my Muslim or Christian neighbors.
And here's a sensitive question, but, if you get a call in a neighborhood where you wouldn't be welcomed if you weren't wearing the orange vest, how does the orange vest transform you into someone else? Does it matter, that you're wearing the kippah on your head? Do you ever feel you need to take the kippah off your head? Do they make comments, or do they just see the orange vest, know you're there to help, and are receptive?
That's a good question. I would say it depends. It's a case by case. Sometimes it's a little bit dicey, and there are areas, especially, and it depends not only on the areas but also the seasons. Meaning there are certain times that are more tense. During the wars in Gaza or Lebanon, there was a much more tense time. Or if there's some sort of intifada or some sort of uprising. It's a much more tense time, and even if you're wearing a vest, or for that matter, coming in an ambulance, we've had cases where ambulances and medics have been attacked. But that having been said, on the majority of cases, they are very, very. Everyone that makes a call to an ambulance wants somebody to come immediately. And ambulances, on average, in Jerusalem could take 12, 15 minutes to show up. In our neighborhood, could take or my area could take even longer. So if there could be a medical person, professional that can show up on the scene within 60 to 90 seconds, I don't think it matters if you're wearing a kippah, a yarmulke on your head, or if you're wearing a turban on your head, or if you're wearing whatever it is. I think that they're very, very happy that somebody is there to take care of you, and that is the most golden time as far as treating someone who has been injured or someone that has a medical emergency, because to wait in a real critical situation for such a long time could be life threatening. So it's very important that somebody can show up right away and fill that gap in order to be able to start treating right away. And that's what we do. We're the angels in orange. We're the people that are walking around in these vests and treating people immediately on the scene. And like I said, regardless of what neighborhood I go into, on average, we are treated with respect. And there are many times that I worked side by side with my Arab colleagues that are medics here, and we treat each other with the utmost professionalism. And when we're treating someone, we're not thinking about if that person is, what religion that person is or what background that person has. We're just thinking about one thing, and that is saving the person's life.
Have you ever been in a situation where you felt fearful? And if you felt you were in a situation where there was, God forbid, a threat to your life, whatever, if it's location or if it's a bystander, someone who's not directly being helped at that moment, but a neighbor who has certain animosities, what would the protocol be?
So the protocol, I think, globally, for any medical personnel is safety first. It's to first think about your own personal safety and the safety of your colleagues before you go to treat, because it just makes sense. It's just logical that if you're going to save someone's life and then something happens to you, So you just put two people in danger instead of the person you're trying to save. So instead of trying to save someone, you're actually creating more of a problem than helping. So your first thing is definitely safety, and there have been times where I have been called into locations, and like I said, unfortunately, this can be a very tense area where there are.
You can keep going.
Yeah. So.
Okay, back on.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we're in an area which has seen its share of very, very tense times. It's also, on occasions, have had its share of terrorist attacks, and therefore one has to be cautious of and aware, situationally aware of their surroundings. That goes anywhere in the world, but definitely in a place that has such tensions like you would see here. By the way, we're on the Mount of Olives right now. We're passing a church which has in it a crypt where the mother-in-law of the Queen of England is buried, Princess Alice. She was recognized as one of the Hasidei Umot Olam.
Okay.
She saved Jews in Greece during the Holocaust. Apropos for someone of another religion saving someone. She saved Jews in Greece during the Holocaust, and even though she came from a Nazi family, the Battenbergs, and she asked to be buried next to her aunt, who is sainted and buried here on the Mount of Olives. So we're traveling up a road which is from ancient times is recognized as a Kohen safe road, because this is where the Sreifat Paraduma, where the red heifer that is a biblical command of burning the times, and we're passing that area right now in what today is a church called Dominus Flevit, and we're continuing up the road to the top of the Mount of Olives. We're going to pass by just quickly, if you're still online, we're going to pass by what is legend to be the tombs of the last three Hebrew prophets, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, and also the 70 Jews. There's a mass grave here. It's one of the two military sections of the Mount of Olives, and it has a mass grave of the 70 Jews that were killed trying to defend the old city in 1948. They were temporarily buried in a mass grave in what's called Batei Mechsa in the Jewish Quarter, and they were brought here in 1967 for reburial after the liberation. We definitely should mic up here for the wind, even if there is a connection. The wind is.
We're back live. You want to tell us a little bit about where we're standing?
Yes. If you can hear me, we're standing right now on the Mount of Olives. Let's go over to the. Let's go over here. Let me find a better position, because you have a fence over here. We're standing on the Mount of Olives, not far from where I actually live. And this place is very special and a very holy place for the Jewish people. If you look out over here, you can see a clear view of the Temple Mount behind us. And actually, this is probably a good place although the sun's sort of beating down on me, this might be a good place to stop and as you have a signal, and answer some questions. What question were we on, Sarah?
We were still, last question we asked was about being part of the chapter of East Jerusalem and
right.
your fellow volunteers.
I think we answered that, didn't we?
That was the last question we
Yeah.
asked, and
Okay.
we're being told we can't hear so well.
Let me check my mic. Okay.
If it's louder, hopefully everyone can hear us. Can you hear us?
Everybody, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Testing, 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing the mic. If you can hear, please let us know.
I'm going to keep asking you some questions and just maybe repeat my questions if possible, because I don't think they can hear me. In terms of just navigating physically around this area, that seemed like quite a drive. If you get a call in between alleyways, are you mostly on your feet? Do you have another vehicle that you use, or do you mostly use your car? How does that work?
So inside the old city, we have a mini ambulance, which actually gets around the old city, the roads of the old city, and then we have a tractorone, which is a quad. The quad actually is able to navigate itself through the different alleyways, but most of the medics get around the old city on foot. And again, we know where all the alleyways are, we know where all the shortcuts are, so we're able to quickly get to the scene as quickly as we can, wherever we are. Here, it's a little bit different. We're in a much larger area over here. We're not in an enclosed, walled city of the old city of Jerusalem. And over here, we have most people are going around in either their cars or on the ambulance cycles. I go around in a car. I have an entire medic pack in the back of the car, and I'm able to get to most places very quickly. In fact, I can even get to the Old City very quickly. I'm one of the first ones to arrive on the scene in certain areas of the Old City. Even before the crew from the Jewish Quarter is able to get there, I'm able to jump into my car here on the Mount of Olives and get to, let's say, the Lion's Gate, which is one of the eastern gates of the Old City of Jerusalem.
When did you move here? I mean, we know from your bio that we posted that you're from Pittsburgh. When did you make Aliyah, and how did you end up choosing this lovely community?
So, I didn't show you my lovely community yet, but I was born in a small town. I have to tell a story because we're on the Mount of Olives. Right above us here there's someone buried. There's over 150,000 people buried, Jews buried here on the Mount of Olives. It's the largest Jewish cemetery, one of the largest in the world. It's the oldest Jewish cemetery in the world. And one of those that's buried here is a Nobel Prize laureate by the name of Shai Agnon. And Shai Agnon, when he went to collect his Nobel Prize in Literature from the King of Sweden, he immediately said the blessing one makes when you see a king. There's a special blessing in Jewish law that you say when you see a king, and he translated it, and the king was duly impressed by this. During the dinner, the king comes over to Shai Agnon and says, "Then where are you from?" And without hesitation, he answered that I was born in a small town in Poland. But he said that was only in a dream. For in reality, I'm from Jerusalem, and I was exiled by Titus 2,000 years ago. So we all believe that we're from here originally, but I was born in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, which is right outside of Pittsburgh. It's a suburb of Pittsburgh. And I came here right after high school, about 30 years ago. I came here originally to study, and then I fell in love with the place. I wound up getting married and having kids here, and doing my Army service here. At one point, we went back to the States where I did my graduate degrees, and then we came back 4 years ago. So when I was single, like I said, I lived in all four quarters of the Old City, and 4 years ago, we decided to move here to the Mount of Olives. If you can turn around, I can show you where I live from here. We're not going to make it there, but I can show you our neighborhood right over the fence over here, and you'll get an idea of where I live. When people ask why I live in such a dangerous place, I always respond that I don't know what you see when you open up your window in the morning, but as you can see, this is my view of the Temple Mount when I open up my window in the morning. So we feel very privileged to live in such a special place in such a special time. So these buildings down below, there's an Israeli flag that's flying from one of them. It's a little bit hard to see because the wind is not blowing right now. But all these buildings down below are all part of the Jewish enclave right now. Jewish neighborhood, two Jewish neighborhoods actually. One is called Ma'aleh Azeitim over here, and the other one is known as Ma'alot David. We have together in this neighborhood about 120 Jewish families, so we're about 1,000 Jews living in just this neighborhood. And there are pockets of neighborhoods across the Mount of Olives today. This is something you didn't see 2 decades ago. You have Kidmat Zion in the south, you have Nof Zion over here, you have the Tayelets over here, you have down below, like I said, Ma'alot David, Ma'aleh Azeitim. Up here, there's an Israeli flag behind us over here. If you can see on top of the mountain, that Israeli flag is a smaller Jewish community. That's called Beit HaChoshen. That's where I pray every Friday night. It has the best view of the Temple Mount. If we could walk around over here, the best view of the Temple Mount that you can get. We actually have, for those Jews that are listening and are familiar with the prayers on Friday night, we have a unique custom there. For those that say the prayer of Lecha Dodi, there's a Jewish custom to turn around either to the back of the synagogue or to the doors of the synagogue. Here, since the Shekhinah, since God's presence is right in front of us, we don't turn our backs to God's presence and we stay standing forward. I think it's the only synagogue like that in the entire world. So it's a very, very special place. And further on, we have Beit Orot, which has a yeshiva, and the chief rabbi of Hebron, here at Ira Hebron, Rabbi Dov Lior, just moved over there and retired. So we have a very special place, and again, we're expanding. It's a thriving Jewish community. Most people, even in Israel, are surprised to hear that here on the Mount of Olives, which most people just think of as a cemetery, is actually a thriving Jewish community today.
Okay, we see Eli Beer has just joined us.
Hi, Eli.
You mentioned that you knew Eli from way back. Can you tell us how you got connected to United Hatzalah in the first place? How did you become an active member?
Eli connected me, of course. Well, how else? Well, it started many years before United Hatzalah existed. That was back when I was the online editor for the Jerusalem Post. And it was at a time when there was, unfortunately, a lot of terror attacks going on here in Israel. There were bus bombings, if people remember, during the Intifada. And I found myself as an editor and as a reporter going out to these scenes and seeing these buses full of people that were just blown up. And I felt somewhat guilty that I'm here to report, and I'm sometimes one of the first people on the scene, and I'm not able to actually. Do you want to move out of the sun? I'm not actually able to respond. I'm not able actually to treat the people that are injured. And I decided that for my crew at the Jerusalem Post, I'm going to start the first medics course for journalists, so that if and when they wind up on a scene first, before the medical first responders wind up there, they're able to start treating as well as reporting on the scene. So that happened many years before United Hatzalah came about. Years later, as I mentioned earlier, I went back to the States and I did my graduate work there. I was the Republican nominee of the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh, and we came back 4 years ago. When we came back 4 years ago, I wanted to renew that license that I had over here to be a first responder, and I met my good friend Eli Beer, and I said to him, "What can I do? How can I do this?" And he said, "What are you talking about? You have to come to us. Come to United Hatzalah. We'll take care of it. We'll send you through the course, and we'll give you one of these great orange jackets, and we'll make you a United Hatzalah medic." And I said, "Let's do it." And I went through a 6-month course, and again, I was trained to be a first responder here in Jerusalem through United Hatzalah.
Eli says hello, and that he's proud of you and all of his volunteers, and he wants to know, what was your proudest moment as United Hatzalah volunteer?
My proudest moment as a United Hatzalah volunteer was probably, I have many proud moments. I mentioned it earlier, that delivering babies is always very emotional. Saving lives, especially at most delicate times when there's a terrorist attack, sometimes under fire. These are all things that are seared into my memory. Probably some of the proudest times that I've had was when the United Hatzalah was able to be the first on the scene. Many, I would say, maybe sometimes 15 minutes to half an hour before an ambulance was able to arrive at the scene and able to treat people. And if it wasn't for the United Hatzalah first responders getting to that scene within 60 to 90 seconds, there's no chance that this person would be alive today when they got into the ambulance and they were transported to the hospital. So every time that happens, that's a very emotional, because I know that we actually saved this person's life. If it wasn't for us, it wasn't for our thousands of volunteers in Jerusalem, they wouldn't have had a chance.
I guess the last question we'll end with we've covered so much ground today. People can't even hear me.
Yeah, I'm speaking for Sarah because you can't hear I'm mic'd up and she's not, so I'll repeat her question.
That we've gone through so many different questions, and people should start from the beginning and watch to get a full picture of what we.
Right, we've gone through all these different questions. If you haven't heard, and people, if you're listening to this now and you haven't heard the beginning, you can go back. It's going to be recorded, and you'll be able to hear it from the beginning. You'll be able to take some of our tour around Jerusalem. I'm translating for you. I'm doing simultaneous translation from English to English, right?
Fantastic. I wanted to ask you, as a volunteer of United Hatzalah, when you do end up coming to a call and you have to make a decision, I guess you can say, I don't want to say between, we asked already the question, it being yourself versus the person, and you said it always starts at first with yourself. However, when you get to a situation where you know that your life is in danger, but that someone's life could be lost at the same time, it's a sensitive question. How does that work? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to walk away from someone in a fatal situation because you had to protect yourself because of this area that you're in? Other volunteers might not be in situations like that. That makes you unique.
I can recall a number of different incidences. One, we mentioned the Temple Mount earlier. I was just asked whether or not, if I had to make a decision between my own safety, being on a scene where I feel in danger, and the life of the people that we're treating, how would we be able to balance that? And it is truly a delicate balance, because it's something that you can only judge at the scene itself what to do. Again, our safety is always first. We're trying to help. We're not trying to be more of a burden on the system. But we have to know that when our lives are in danger, sometimes we have to step aside, and there's other people that are trained to take care of the situation, whether it be the security forces or whether it be the fire department. Right, there could be a fire, for example. I've been to fires where there are people that are dying inside of a building, but we know that if we run into this building to save them, that we're going to be injured or killed ourselves. So it's not wise for us to do that. We have to wait until the fire department comes and is able to either bring these people out or put out the fire before we're able to enter the scene and take care of it. We mentioned before the Temple Mount, 6 months ago approximately, there was an attack where two police officers were mortally wounded on the Temple Mount. I was one of the responders of that attack. And in the middle of the treating mount, in the middle of the treatment, one of the terrorists, I'm sure anybody who's actually got up and was there. I was in the background. I'm treating somebody, and all of a sudden, I out of the corner of my eye, I see this person getting up, and I see the police shooting, and so there's shooting going on all around us, and we didn't actually have time to think about whether we should continue treating. We were in the middle of resuscitating someone, whether we should continue treating or whether we should move away. We continued treating. The incident ended very, very quickly. If it would have continued, we probably would have had to leave the scene. But under the circumstances, actually, one of the medics was actually shot. Thank God he was not seriously injured, and he didn't even realize he was shot until afterwards. He was actually hit by shrapnel in his leg, and it was only afterwards that he realized he was shot, and he was also treated. But this is just an example of when we could be at a scene, such a sensitive sort of place, and treating someone, and there's so much adrenaline going on, and it could be an active scene where 1 minute it's seems completely safe, and the next minute there's bullets flying around you. And this is something that United Hatzalah medics have to deal with almost on a regular basis.
In many of the branches around Israel, there's a very special relationship between the Chofshim, no matter what community they're from or what their religious background is. Do you have a greater challenge in that sense, being part of the branch that you're in? And do you befriend them, or is it professional speaking only? And
so Sarah's asking about our relationship with the other my colleagues here. Many of them are medics of different religious backgrounds. They may be Muslim Arabs or Christian Arabs. Our relationship is a good one, and like I said, there have even been times where they have helped me. There have been times where I've been under attack here in East Jerusalem, and they've actually stood up to protect me in these cases. So yes, I very much rely on them. They rely on me. And we have a very, very special relationship, and that goes definitely within the old city walls, which includes medics of all religions, Jews, Muslims, Christians, and we are all, one family. The United Hatzalah is we're one family member, one family, and all of the medical personnel, all the medical professionals feel this way about each other. When we're wearing this vest, we're no longer Jews, we're no longer Muslims, we're no longer Christians. We are medical professionals that are out to save lives, and everything else is put aside.
Incredible. And just quickly, how many years have you been with United Hatzalah as a volunteer?
I've been a volunteer for United Hatzalah, I believe, 3 years now.
Can you say what an average is of calls a day? Does it work like that?
So we get calls actually every day. I would say multiple calls a day in the different areas here. The way that United Hatzalah works, the system that works on it, is that we're thousands of volunteers, and which makes it that much more special because we're not paid, we're not necessarily on call. We're volunteers that are in the middle of doing what everybody else does. We're in school, we're working, we're at home with our families, and all of a sudden we're getting a call and we're dropping everything in order to go out to that call. So if we're able to go to that call, we go, and whoever's, like I said, the closest proximity, whoever's the best trained, whoever's able to get up and go at the time, and that depends on the day, whether, depending on my availability, if I'm able to get up and leave, depending on what the call is and how serious I think it is. There's obviously, I'm going to treat differently somebody who just fell and scratched their knee to a major terrorist attack that's happening, and we have these are decisions that are made at a split second. as we get the call, when we have to drop things and when we have to go. And again, depending on proximity, depending on our qualifications, and depending on the situation that we're being called to, we are found dropping everything in our daily lives in order to go and save lives.
I want to thank you, first of all, so much for this incredible experience. I want people to hear me saying this.
Okay, then you probably should unplug.
I want to thank Josh so much, first of all, for being one of our 4,000 volunteers. Eli Beer thanks you, United Hatzalah thanks you, the country of Israel thanks you, and the world thanks you. This has been an incredible tour. For people who missed it, I definitely encourage to start from the beginning. It's an incredible just tour of the Old City and the four quarters. We didn't go to all four, but just to experience sides of Jerusalem that we've never experienced. This is Josh Wander Live. We are currently in a place in Har Zeitim, and this is where he lives, and he just spoke for an hour about what it is like to be a chovesh, a volunteer for United Hatzalah in the East Jerusalem chapter. You want to tell us one more time, are you the only Jew in the chapter? I don't remember if we had said that yet or not.
I'm probably the only Jew in this area, yes.
In this area.
But like I said, we have others. I take that back. I'm the only active one. My wife is a critical care nurse in Hadassah and Kerem, and she is also a volunteer for United Hatzalah. She's not as active as I am because she is a mother of 6 children, and she's a full-time nurse as well, critical care nurse. But she definitely goes and calls with me on occasion when she can. I have to.
So there's two of you.
Send my wife my love, because this is definitely, she deserves as much credit, if not more, than I do. We're here speaking from the Temple Mount. I wanted to say that also anyone who has any questions, further questions, either about United Hatzalah or about myself or living in East Jerusalem, about here at the Mount of Olives, I give people briefings here on a daily basis, and I'm happy to answer your questions. You can contact me on Facebook or through other social media through United Hatzalah, and I'm happy to answer any questions or give you a tour if you like of the area anytime. So please feel free anytime to make contact.
One last incredible view, and again, that is where Josh lives, right in front of us. Hard to see from here, but live from Har Zeitim. Josh, thank you so much. Oh, one last thing.
1 second. If you have this in the background, I have to say something.
Yes.
So, you see the Temple Mount in the background?
Yes.
Okay. Plug me in. That way you may be.
Yeah, there's wind up here.
Just focus on the Temple Mount. I just want to say quickly about the Temple Mount, something which many people are not familiar. One of the myths that I try to dispel of all tourists that come to Jerusalem is that the Western Wall is the holiest place for the Jewish people. That's clearly not the case. The Mishnah, the Talmud says that there are 10 levels of holiness in the world. The lowest level of holiness, of course, is the land of Israel. After that comes walled cities in Israel, and then it jumps up to Jerusalem, and it skips the Western Wall, and it goes to the next level, which is the Temple Mount, and it continues up and up and up until it gets to the highest level of holiness, which is the place of the Holy of Holies of Jerusalem, of the Temple, which is, according to our tradition, where the gold dome sits today, what's called the Dome of the Rock. Under this dome is a huge stone called the Foundation Stone, and this Foundation Stone is where the world, according to Jewish tradition, was created from. Adam was created from the Adamah, from the land, the earth that was taken from that place. Cain and Hevel, his 2 sons, fought each other, one killing the other over bringing sacrifices in that place. Noah's ark lands on Mount Ararat, and he comes here to bring sacrifices. If you turn around, Sarah, to the other direction, that mountain over there is where Abraham actually was standing, coming from Beersheba, according to the biblical narrative. He's coming from Beersheba, and he sees Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount. Come back around over here, the Temple Mount over here, and he leaves Eliezer and Ishmael behind, and comes here to do the binding of Isaac. Jacob's ladder, he falls asleep here, he dreams of a ladder with angels going up and down the ladder. The first and second temple stood here, the third soon to stand here. This is the center of the world. In Jewish thought, this is it. This is the beginning. But this is also the peak of Mount Moriah, as we mentioned before. So in order to make a place for a service, to have a place for a temple, you can't do it on a peak of a mountain. You have to do it on a flat surface. So how do you make a flat surface out of a peak of a mountain? You could either cut it in half, or you could build something around it. They chose Plan B to build a huge man-made platform around the peak of the mountain, which we call the Temple Mount, which is this flat surface you see in front of you. It's being held up by 50 subterraneous caverns. There's these huge arches under the ground that are holding it up. And in order to hold it up from the sides, you need to have retaining walls. One of those is in the west, and it is called the Western Wall. And that's where we were earlier. But you can also see over here the remnants of what's called the Southern Wall, which has Sha'arei Hulda. Hulda, according to the Jewish tradition, is one of the 7 prophetesses. She gave over a prophecy as Jews would come 3 times a year on pilgrimages up to the temple over here in the south. You have a beautiful view here of the eastern retaining wall in front of us, which is in some ways more impressive than the western side. It has stones dating back from the first temple period. On the other side, you just have Herodian sites from the second temple period. And there's so much to discuss here, but I couldn't not mention the fact that we have this incredible, the holiest place for the Jewish people right here behind us. And I'm so, like I said, feel so privileged to live in such a special place, in such a special time, and to be a medic saving lives for United Hatzalah.
We want to thank everyone.
Just unplug.
Okay. Thank everyone that tuned in.
We want to thank everybody that's tuned in from California, from New York, from Israel, from around the globe, and everybody that's going to watch this on recorded. Thank you so much for being a part of the sharing this experience with the United Hatzalah family, and we hope that you'll be back soon.
Again.